Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today we're going to be practicing our cones in quilling paper. So we're going to be making some bluebell flowers. For my flowers here, I have this really pretty light purple called Orchid from Quilled Creations. I'm also going to be making some stems and leaves, so I have leaf green from Craft Harbor. Both of those are 1/8 inch wide. I do have my work board covered in parchment paper and some pins. You're going to need that when you're putting your flowers together. We need to use a slotted tool for this project, so I have the Quilled Creations Savvy Slotted Tool. It's a very fine center here, but you can use any slotted tool you have. I just like this one for the ease of the turning. Also, some tweezers. For glue, I have just Elmer's glue all in my needle nose container, but I do also have some tacky glue I'm going to use when we're putting the flowers and stems together. To start off with, we're going to be making cones. And I do have an entire video just on making cones that I'll link in the description box for this video. But we're starting off with about 9 inches of that light purple, that orchid color, in my slotted tool. And I start rolling it, and I have it sort of slanted on the tool. I roll it a couple times just straight in the beginning, and then I pull it just very slightly to the side, and you can see that my finger is behind it, keeping it all together. I've just found that that is helpful in keeping the cones, especially when they're this small, in line. I'm just rolling it very slowly, at the same time making sure that the tail of the paper is at a slight angle. That's going to make it get longer as it gets wider. There you go, a tiny little cone. Once I get to the end of that, while my finger is still holding it in place, I put a little bit of glue on the end, and then I'm also going to run a small line of glue all the way down the cone, spin it a few times, and that's going to keep my cone together. All those little layers are going to get a little bit of glue on them, and it's going to keep the cone shape. Notice I do have a slight line in there where my cone did not completely get the same angle start to finish. That is okay. For this project, nobody's going to see that. You will need to make about 10 of these little cones to get the same size bluebell stems that I'm making. And I do have 2 that are just slightly smaller at about 7 inches or so of the strip I use to make the cone. Those are going to be our last 2 bluebells once we put them on the stem. And for the stem, I have here a length of that leaf green paper. For each stem, you're only going to need about 3 inches or so, but this piece as a whole is about 12 inches, maybe a little bit longer. And I'm just making a double thick strip here, so I folded it in half, place a line of glue all the way down 1/2, and then fold it back up together, and then run my fingers all the way down just to make sure there's no air bubbles and all the glue gets pushed from end to end. That's going to make a nice sturdy strip, and you've seen this many times if you follow my channel at all. We're going to go ahead and just put that to the side and let that get nice and dry, and that's going to be perfect for the stem of our bluebell plants. So now we have all our components together here. I have some pins. These are just straight pins like you would use for sewing. I have my tacky glue, and I have my work board covered in parchment paper. Our flowers are not going to stick to this. This is just a place to get it all together. And I'm going to be dipping my flowers in the glue, so I put a little bit of a pile of glue, a little puddle right on the corner of my paper. I have about 3 or 4 inches of that double thick strip that I made earlier that's nice and dry, and I just ran it between my fingers to try to get just a slight curve in it, because our flowers are going to be sort of blowing in the wind a little bit. They're not going to be straight up and down on their stem. They have a little bit of life to them. I want that to be kind of sturdy, so that's why I put those 2 pins right in the center there. I have my tweezers, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here just to make sure that everybody can see how we're going to put our flowers, those little cones, on our stem. And they're going to be sort of in layers. There's going to be 3 in the bottom, and then another 3, and so on. Get everything organized here. And I mentioned earlier, I do have 2 cones that are just slightly smaller, so those are going to be saved for the end. A little bit of dip here in the tacky glue. A little bit too much, less is more. And I'm going to put one on one side of my stem. You can get these down about 1.5 inches or so from the top of where your stem's going to be. If you do end up with a little bit more of a stem poking out of the top of your flowers than you like, you can snip that off. So don't worry too much about exactly where you're starting. With this, I would just give yourself a little bit of room for this first layer. So I just finished my second flower on the other side of the stem, and now I'm going to put one. Oh, that one's sticking to my tweezers. Let's get rid of that for a second. Let's do another one. There we go. Right in the center, a little bit higher than the first 2 that I put on either side. So that's now glued to the stem and to the first 2 bluebell flowers. So let's try to reuse that one. The glue is dried now. Tweezers are great, but sometimes they get a little bit complicated to work with. Okay, so now we're going to do our second layer of bluebells. We're following the curve of our stem. We went up a little bit higher, so it's coming sort of out a slant and going to be resting on that first layer. So you'll be able to see that a little bit better when I do the other side here that's facing the camera. Just get it in there like so. There we go. It does not need to be sticking all the way the length of the flower to the stem. It's okay if it's just the end there. It will still stay. Tacky glue is amazing and it will work just fine. And we are going to, after that layer, put another one on top between the ones that are touching the stem. That can get a little bit tricky, especially when you're trying to do it through a camera. There we go. Still following the curve of the stem. Perfect. All right. Let that dry for a couple minutes and then we can move on to the next little buds. Same thing for these ones. One to the side there and one to the other side. Mine ended up right at the end of the stem, mostly because I've made a bunch of these and now I know by eyeballing it where to start. Like I said earlier, if you have a little bit of stem that peeks out, do not fear. You can snip that off when you're done. There we go. That's what we're looking for at this point. And then the last thing to do is to take our smaller flower buds and we're going to put those right next to each other on the top. So we don't have so much as a really pointy cone flower shape when they're all together. I know individually they're cones, but all together, I didn't really want this to come to a kind of a point. So I have 2 together for that last layer. And when this is dry, I'll move it slightly. Oh, I'll move it now actually. There you can kind of see better what I mean by putting the 2 next to each other. And we made those just a little bit smaller so they fit with a little bit of wiggling. There we go. Just like that. So that is our little finished bluebell, almost like a hyacinth type vibe as well. If you're looking for something like that, there's going to be a few different flowers. A lot of flowers kind of have that cone flower shape. Last thing we're going to do is make some leaves, and we're just going to mix up the leaves just a little bit than just some standard leaves you've seen 100 times. I do have that same leaf green from Craft Harbor that I made for the stem, and I have different sizes here. I think this one was about 6-7 inches, maybe a little bit longer. The size doesn't so much matter. I did roll it end to end to get a nice coil, took it off my tool, and add a little bit of glue to the end. Once that's sealed up, we are going to just smush it in the center slightly. Not really slightly, actually all the way down. Smush it real good. And then also pinch either side just to make it very flat, kind of a really flattened marquee really flat diamond shape. And I have two that are longer and then one small piece made the same way. What I'm going to do is sort of make like a long broad leaf that has bent over. Not every leaf kind of sticks straight up in the air. Sometimes they start bending a bit. So I have one of the long pieces that I'm going to attach to the stem, and then I'm going to take my small piece that I made the same way and just put it on the end there. So now that leaf has just sort of bent over from the weight of itself. Like I said, mixing it up just a little bit. That is completely optional. You don't need to do any of this, but it's fun to try new things. There is the other leaf on the other side, and that's about it. That's about it for our flowers made from cones. Let that dry on the board there. I want to show a couple different colors. I do have one that's more of a blue. That is a Craft Harbor paper called Light Blue. I also have another in the orchid color there. And I also want to show the variated colors. You could use that if you have any of this lying around. This is a color called Hyacinths. It's a hard word for me to say. From Paplin paper. It's kind of hard to find, but I'll link to some similar options. And what I did was tore these strips right down the center, used the paler end for the base of the cone, and let it get deeper as it came out. And I thought that made a really pretty sort of variation. It's hard to find out some great crafts to do with those variated papers, so I thought this would be a good option for that. Now, what to do with these bluebell flowers, these hyacinths, whatever you want to call them. They're pretty on their own. I also thought it would be fun to sort of tuck them into sort of a summer, spring flower scape here. So I pulled in some different things with using some different techniques, some big sunflowers, and I have some pansies here from last summer, and they just give a really nice texture, a nice height. Instead of just using greenery to make your lines and your length on your floral arrangements, you can add some of these type of flowers as well. It pulls in the purple from the pansies, and purple and yellow go really well together. And just for fun, here's a couple of ladybugs just hovering around. I'll link to all of those projects in the description box for this video, as well as the longer version of the cone tutorial that I have done a few years ago. And I'll look around if I have any other cone projects. I know mushrooms comes to mind. I'll add that in as well. It's a fun technique. It's not something you do super often as quilling, but it actually is very, very simple once you get the hang of the right angle to hold your strip. And remember that, just spin and keep it at an angle and you'll be perfect and ready to go. I will also leave links to all the supplies that I used in the description box for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will get back to them as soon as I can. Don't forget to also, while you're in the description box, check out the link for my Buy Me a Coffee page, where if you would like to, you can leave a little bit of extra support there. It helps me grow the channel and keep making videos. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be around for the next one. And I'll see you then. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.